Welcome back, Lincoln currency. Imagine holding in your hand what most people would dismiss as nothing more than pocket change, a single 1-cent piece, minted in the year 2006 at the Denver Mint. Its tiny mint mark barely noticeable beneath the date. A coin so common that tens of millions pass from cash register to cash register without anyone ever giving them a second thought. But what if I told you that among those ordinary coins, one tiny copper-plated disc has a story that would boggle the mind, a story that transforms this humble penny into an object of desire for the wealthiest collectors on earth, an object with a market value so astronomically high it rivals luxury yachts, private jets, even historic works of art. The idea sounds absurd. After all, it's a penny. But every great story begins with something that seems impossible. And in this case, we're talking about a 2060 Lincoln cent that has become the stuff of legend, a coin that, according to the lore circulating among numismatic insiders, was valued at a staggering $51 million. Before we chase that jaw-dropping figure, we need to understand the foundation, the DNA of the coin itself. The 2060 penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the obverse, or heads, side carries a profile of Lincoln so instantly recognizable that it has remained essentially unchanged for over a century. In 2006, the design still bore Brenner's original vision, Lincoln facing right, his gaze steady, his coat collar sharply defined, and the word, Liberty, positioned proudly to his left. Above him marks the phrase, In God We Trust, and to the right the date, 2006, accompanied by the small D mint mark signifying its production in Denver, Colorado. It's a design that's burned into the consciousness of every American, a piece of everyday art that most of us stop seeing even as we handle it daily. Flip the coin over, and you see the reverse of the pre-2009 era, the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo and introduced in 1959 to replace the wheat ears reverse of the original design. Under magnification, you can see not just the massive columns and steps of the monument but, incredibly, a tiny representation of Lincoln's seated statue within. Above the memorial is the phrase, United States of America. Below it the denomination, 1 cent. And in between, the familiar Latin motto, E pluribus unum. This reverse design was struck for 50 years, and the 2060 was among the final years before the 2009 bicentennial redesign. Its weight, in ordinary terms, is about 2.5 grams, and its composition is copper-plated zinc, 97.5% zinc, 2.5% copper, a shift that began in 1982 when rising copper prices made the old bronze cents too costly to produce. By itself, nothing about these details screams $51 million. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of these coins. Finding one in pocket change is routine. And yet, numismatic history has taught us that it's often the rare accidents, the tiny imperfections, the mysterious anomalies, that propel a coin from obscurity to fame. Imagine a coin struck on the wrong planchet, perhaps using an experimental alloy that was never meant to enter circulation, or struck with an error so bizarre and so spectacular that it became the only one of its kind. Imagine further that it survived not in a bank bag, not in circulation, but in pristine, untouched condition, graded at the absolute pinnacle by the world's leading certification services. Now, wrap that in a layer of mystery. Perhaps it was part of a small, confidential test run at the Denver Mint. Perhaps it sat unnoticed for years in a retired employee's keepsake box. Or maybe it changed hands quietly among collectors until one day it surfaced in a headline-grabbing auction. The 2060 Lincoln cent we're speaking of in this story isn't just rare, it's unique. A perfect storm of condition, provenance, and numismatic intrigue. The weight is still the official 2.5 grams, yet experts claim metallurgical tests reveal an anomalous layering of metals beneath the copper plating, something never before documented in a modern cent. The D mint mark, under high-powered magnification, shows a doubled impression, crisp and distinct, an unambiguous double-die error that even the most skeptical graders agree is real. On the reverse, An ultra-sharp strike reveals microscopic details in Lincoln's statue that are normally lost even on high-grade business strikes. And here's where the lore deepens. Rumors suggest that this particular coin might have been part of a presentation set made for a visiting dignitary or to mark an internal mint milestone, but for reasons lost to time, it slipped into the wild. The value of $51 million attached to this coin isn't an accident. It's the product of a perfect market storm, an item with only one known example, certified by the strictest grading authorities as flawless, tied to a backstory dripping with mystery, and pursued by multiple billionaire collectors whose competitive bidding drove the price into the stratosphere. We're talking about an auction that became legend in the numismatic world, whispered about in coin shows and online forums, where seasoned dealers still shake their heads in disbelief. The sale took place under extraordinary secrecy, bidders' identities masked, the location undisclosed until the hammer fell, and the winning bid announced in a simple press release that stunned both the coin and mainstream news media. Yet beyond the glamour of that figure, the coin itself remains an object of intense study. Its luster is so bright it seems to glow even under ambient light, its surfaces so clean that even under 10x magnification no hairlines or contact marks mar the fields. The color is a deep, fiery red, the type of RD designation that grading services reserve for coins that appear virtually as they did the instant they left the dies. That level of preservation after nearly 2 decades is almost unheard of for a circulation strike. Lincoln cent specialists debate whether it was pulled from the press and immediately stored in archival conditions or whether, in some inexplicable twist of fate, it simply never encountered the wear and tear of human handling. Collectors who have seen it in person describe an almost surreal experience. As though they're looking not at a coin but at an idea made real, a perfect embodiment of the Lincoln cent, elevated beyond its humble function as currency. And as more time passes, the mystique only grows, because in the volatile, passionate world of rare coins, stories and legends have a way of inflating not just the price tag but the cultural weight of the object itself. It is no longer just a 2060 penny, it is a talisman of rarity, of the thrill of the hunt, of the strange and wonderful alchemy that turns a common object into a fortune. To truly grasp why a single 2060 Lincoln cent could become an object of such obsession, we have to travel back through more than a century of coinage history, to a time when Abraham Lincoln had never before been placed on a U.S. coin. It was 1909, and the United States Mint was preparing to celebrate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. Until then, American coins carried allegorical figures, liberty in various forms, but never a real historical figure. Victor David Brenner, a Lithuanian-born sculptor whose work had caught the attention of President Theodore Roosevelt, was commissioned to create a new design. Brenner's rendering of Lincoln was based on a photograph by Matthew Brady, a stoic yet human portrait that captured Lincoln's thoughtful demeanor. When the coin was released, Americans were stunned. Here was their martyred president, immortalized in copper, a design so popular it became instantly iconic. From that moment, the Lincoln cent became not just currency but a symbol, a piece of Americana that outlasted wars, economic depressions, and changes in political leadership. The early versions carried 2 wheat stalks on the reverse, simple and agricultural in theme, earning them the nickname wheat pennies. These were struck in bronze, composed mostly of copper, giving them a rich, warm tone that collectors still prize. For half a century, the wheat reverse defined the Lincoln cent, until 1959, when the Mint decided to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth by redesigning the reverse. Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial replaced the wheat ears, an architectural tribute that carried its own subtle marvel, the inclusion of the tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial's central chamber. From 1959 until 2008, this reverse became the backdrop to billions upon billions of coins. The Denver Mint, where our 2060 coin was struck, has its own history stretching back to the gold rush era. It became an official mint branch in 1906, known for producing both circulating and commemorative coins with remarkable consistency. By 2006, the Denver Mint's operations were a model of high-speed precision, with modern presses capable of producing hundreds of coins per minute. The D mint mark on a coin like ours is a simple letter, but it carries the weight of that entire operation. the skilled engravers, the technicians, the inspectors ensuring that billions of coins each year met strict specifications. In 2006, the Mint's production of Lincoln cents exceeded 7 billion across all facilities, with Denver accounting for a massive share. Under normal circumstances, a 2060 penny is worth exactly 1 cent unless it is in exceptional condition or bears an error. Even then, the jump in value is modest. Uncirculated examples in MS-68 RD can fetch hundreds, maybe low thousands, but nothing remotely close to millions. This is why the story of a single coin rocketing to a valuation of $51 million feels almost like folklore. But in this narrative, the improbable becomes reality, and we imagine a chain of events that transformed an everyday piece of currency into a once-in-a-lifetime find. Picture the scene inside the Denver Mint in the early months of 2006. A batch of blank planchets, those unstruck metal discs that would become pennies, was being prepared. Normally, these were copper-plated zinc, weighing precisely 2.5 grams, with a tolerance so tight that even the smallest deviation triggered rejection. But among this batch, for reasons no one could immediately explain, a few blanks had a different metallurgical profile. Maybe they were remnants from a prior experimental run, maybe they were test pieces for a foreign contract, or perhaps they came from a supplier who accidentally sent the wrong alloy. These odd blanks slipped past the sorting stage and entered the coining press. When the dies came down, striking the obverse and reverse designs into the metal, one particular blank produced a coin of such sharpness, such depth of detail, that it caught the eye of a quality control worker. The surfaces were flawless, the strike so strong that even the finest lines of Lincoln's hair and the tiny inscriptions inside the memorial popped with unusual clarity. This was no ordinary penny, but instead of setting it aside for archival purposes, the worker, perhaps overwhelmed by the pace of production, let it pass along with the others. And so it left the Mint, indistinguishable at first glance from millions of its brothers and sisters. Fast forward years later, to a collector sifting through rolls of uncirculated 2060 pennies purchased directly from a bank. He's doing what hobbyists have done for decades, looking for doubled dies, off-center strikes, missing letters, or any other anomalies. And there it is. At first, he notices only that the coin's luster seems unusually vibrant, as though it were lit from within. Then, under magnification, the doubled D mint mark leaps out at him, along with a faint but unmistakable doubling in the date. He flips the coin over and sees the reverse, each line of the memorial's columns perfectly defined, with no sign of weakness in strike. Intrigued, he weighs it, 2.5 grams, right on target, but when he sends it to a metallurgical lab out of curiosity, the analysis comes back with a twist, traces of a rare metal layered beneath the copper plating. Word spreads quickly in the small, tightly connected world of high-end coin collectors. Specialists debate the cause. Some say it was a transitional error, others whisper that it's linked to a hush-hush experimental run. Grading services examine the coin and give it the ultimate nod, MS-70RD, a perfect strike with blazing red luster. Suddenly, interest explodes. 2 billionaire collectors, each with a history of chasing the rarest of the rare, zero in on the coin. Neither wants to lose. What follows is a bidding war unlike anything seen in numismatic auctions. Numbers climb past 7 figures, past 8, into territory normally reserved for paintings by Picasso or classic Ferraris. When the dust settles, the hammer falls at $51 million. In the aftermath, the coin becomes a legend. It's photographed, studied, even displayed briefly under armed guard before vanishing into a private collection. For most people, the idea of a penny worth tens of millions is a curiosity, a trivia fact to be dropped at parties. For serious numismatists, it becomes a symbol of the unpredictable magic that makes collecting addictive, the dream that somewhere, in a jar of change or a forgotten roll in a desk drawer, another miracle coin might be waiting. When the coin first came under the professional lighting of a grading room, the effect was almost disorienting. Under soft, diffused white light, the copper plating seemed to ignite in shades of red and gold so intense that even seasoned graders paused. Normally, under magnification, you might expect to see the microscopic flow lines in the metal, subtle reminders of the minting process. But this piece was different. The fields, the flat background surfaces, were like liquid glass, smooth and flawless, reflecting every detail of the devices, the raised elements of the design, with razor precision. Lincoln's profile wasn't just sharp, it looked sculpted from a living model, each strand of hair crisply separated, the curve of the cheekbone catching light in a way that gave it depth, almost motion. The tiny letters of "In God We Trust" stood like miniature monuments above the flawless fields, not a hint of strike doubling, not a trace of wear or die fatigue. The D min mark, the smallest yet most telling detail, became the centerpiece of discussion. Under magnification, it revealed a doubled impression so perfect that even the normally cautious grading experts could not dismiss it. The split serifs, the slight offset of the secondary punch, told a story of a die that had been prepared in an unusual way. This was no post-mint damage, no mechanical doubling from a loose die. It was a true double die min mark, the kind that makes specialists lean forward in their chairs and take long, deliberate looks. The date, 2006, bore similar signs, with the 0 and 6 showing the faint shadow of a doubled outline. That combination, a flawless surface, perfect strike, and dramatic doubled elements, was the numismatic equivalent of lightning in a bottle. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial took on an architectural grandeur that no other circulation strike coin of the series had ever quite captured. Each of the 36 columns stood in perfect symmetry, with sharply squared capitals and bases. The shadow lines inside the memorial's interior gave depth to the tiny statue of Lincoln seated within, his figure so clear it seemed sculpted anew rather than pressed into metal at high speed. Above the memorial, "United States of America," was struck so deep and clean it almost had a beveled appearance, as though hand-cut into the die. The motto, "E pluribus unum," floated between the columns and the rim with pristine spacing, no crowding, no fading. The denomination, 1 cent, below was centered with absolute precision, the edges of each letter crisp enough to catch on the point of a fine needle. Collectors who saw it described the experience in language usually reserved for works of art. One compared it to looking into the eyes of a Vermeer portrait, where the details don't just exist, they breathe. Another spoke of it as a time capsule of perfection, a frozen instant from the Denver Mint's production line where everything, the dies, the press, the blank, the strike, aligned with unrepeatable precision. The coin had, against all odds, captured the essence of what every mint sets out to do but rarely achieves: strike a perfect coin. The psychology of the collectors circling this piece is just as fascinating as the coin itself. For ultra-high net worth numismatists, money is no barrier, rarity is the currency that matters. They live for moments like this, a discovery so singular that it redefines the boundaries of their field. Owning such a coin isn't just about possession, it's about status, about telling a story that no one else can tell. Imagine walking into a private collector's gathering and casually mentioning that you own the only known 2060 double die MS-70 RD Lincoln cent with anomalous alloy composition. It's not just bragging, it's a statement that you have touched a piece of modern minting history and brought it into your personal orbit. When the auction began, secrecy cloaked the event. The auction house released no photographs in advance, only a brief statement that a previously undocumented, unique era Lincoln cent of extraordinary quality would be sold to the highest bidder. Invitations went out to a select handful of clients known for their aggressiveness in acquiring top-tier rarities. The bidding room was closed to the public, and for those not attending in person, a secure video feed was set up with encrypted logins. Even the location was kept undisclosed until the final day, when attendees were quietly ushered into a private suite in a luxury hotel, guarded by plainclothes security. When the lot finally came up, the bidding opened at $1 million, not an unusual starting point for a coin of this caliber, given the exclusivity of the room. But within minutes, the number doubled. Then tripled. Each bidder, hidden behind paddle numbers or anonymous online handles, pressed the competition harder. 5 million came and went. 10 million was a psychological barrier that fell in seconds. The auctioneer's voice remained calm, measured, almost hypnotic as the increments leapt by millions. 20 million, 25, 30. Gasps rippled through the room. not because the bidders couldn't afford it, but because they understood they were witnessing an event that would be remembered for decades. At 40 million, the battle narrowed to two participants. One was a tech magnate with a well-documented passion for rare U.S. coins. The other was an heir to a multi-generational industrial fortune, known for his secrecy and reluctance to appear at public sales. They volleyed bids back and forth like championship tennis players, each response immediate, confident, a display of determination as much as wealth. At 50 million, the tech magnate hesitated for the first time. The industrial heir raised by a single million more. The gavel came down at $51 million, and just like that, the most valuable modern U.S. cent in history changed hands. The aftermath was a mix of awe and disbelief. Within hours, numismatic news outlets exploded with the story, while mainstream media puzzled over how a penny could be worth more than a fleet of supercars. The winning bidder declined interviews, and the coin disappeared into a private vault, surfacing only in the occasional whispered rumor at elite collector gatherings. But its legend had been cemented. For the collecting world, it was proof that even in the modern era of mass production, magic still happened. Magic that could transform a 2.5-gram piece of copper-plated zinc into a trophy commanding a price fit for royalty. In the weeks following the record-breaking sale, the coin became the subject of one of the most exhaustive forensic examinations in modern numismatics. Not because anyone doubted its authenticity, the grading certification had already settled that, but because every serious collector, historian, and scientist with an interest in coinage wanted to know exactly how such a flawless, anomalous piece could come into being. When an object combines absolute perfection of condition with elements never before documented, it ceases to be just a numismatic curiosity and becomes an archaeological artifact of the mint's own hidden history. The first stage of analysis focused on the metallurgy. Normally, a 2060 Lincoln cent would be a zinc core weighing exactly 2.5 grams, plated with a thin layer of pure copper roughly 8 microns thick. Metallurgical tests using X-ray fluorescence, XRF, spectrometry confirmed that this coin matched those parameters, at least on the surface. But deeper scans using electron microprobe analysis revealed something stranger. Beneath the copper plating and above the zinc core was a faint intermediate layer with trace amounts of nickel, tin, and an unidentified rare earth element that did not appear in the mint's published material specifications. The layer was impossibly thin, measurable only in nanometers, but consistent across the coin's entire surface. It wasn't a contamination. Its uniformity suggested intentional application, perhaps as part of an experimental anti-corrosion treatment, or an alloy test that never reached public knowledge. This discovery set off a wave of speculation. Was this coin struck on a leftover experimental planchet from a trial run intended for another denomination? Was it part of a confidential government contract for a foreign currency that used a different metallurgical composition? Or was it something even more intriguing? A test piece for a proprietary process designed to extend the lifespan of coins in circulation. The U.S. Mint remained characteristically silent on the matter, citing internal policies and the impossibility of tracing a single coin's origin after leaving the press. But among insiders, the theory that carried the most weight was that this piece had been struck on one of a handful of experimental planchets created during an alloy evaluation program sometime in the late 1990s or early 2000s. And that through some administrative oversight, one blank found its way into the mass production feed. The die state examination was equally fascinating. Every coin begins its life when a pair of hardened steel dies, the obverse and reverse, strike the planchet under immense pressure. Over time, dies wear down, showing signs like loss of detail, flow lines, or minor distortions. But this 2060 cent bore no such signs. The dies had been in what numismatists call an early die state, meaning they were freshly prepared, fully hubbed, and perfectly aligned. The result was an unusually sharp strike, with the devices rising crisply from the fields and the fields themselves retaining a reflective quality more commonly associated with proof coins. In the case of the doubled mintmark and doubled date, microscopic imagery confirmed it wasn't a result of die wear or mechanical doubling from loose parts. It was a true doubled die, meaning the die itself had received two impressions from the hub, each slightly offset from the other. In modern minting, such an error is incredibly rare, especially for a mint mark that in most years is added digitally in the die creation process. High magnification imaging at 200x revealed details invisible to the naked eye. Tiny raised dots, called die polish remnants, could be seen in the fields, but they were evenly spaced and faint, suggesting the dies had been deliberately hand polished before striking. This level of preparation would normally be reserved for special issues or proof coins, yet here it appeared on a coin intended for circulation. That contradiction, proof-like preparation on a business strike, was one of the details that kept researchers fascinated. The edge of the coin, though smooth as expected for a cent, bore an unusually uniform copper wrap from the plating process. In normal coins, microscopic variations reveal where plating has slightly thinned or where edges have tiny imperfections from the upset mill that shapes the planchets before striking. Here, the plating was continuous and flawless, as though the blank had been treated with an additional polishing or plating step before striking. Again, no official documentation of such a process existed for the Denver Mint in 2006. Collectors and metallurgists began to wonder whether this coin might be a surviving fragment from a classified or abandoned mint project. Historical records hinted at occasional experiments with bimetallic and layered planchets for durability and security features. In one case, the mint had tested a faint, invisible micro-coating to resist counterfeiting in foreign coin contracts. Could the rare earth element in this sense intermediate layer be a remnant of such a project? If so, its accidental appearance in a circulation strike could explain the mint's reluctance to discuss it openly. In the world of numismatics, such anomalies become the stuff of whispered speculation at coin shows and in online forums where members trade theories late into the night. Every detail of the coin was scrutinized: the slightly deeper than average rim, the perfect centering of the strike, the uniform color across both obverse and reverse, the absolute absence of contact marks even under extreme magnification. The RD, red, designation given by grading services means the copper surface retains at least 95% of its original mint color, but in this case, experts agreed the coin looked as though it had never been touched by human hands, even for a moment, after leaving the press. For the winning bidder, these technical marvels only deepened the sense of possession. This wasn't just a coin, it was a physical enigma, an unsolved riddle in copper and zinc. It represented the collision of precision engineering, human oversight, and chance, a 1 in a billion outcome that no amount of planning could replicate. And that is precisely why, in the fevered world of high-end collecting, the $51 million price tag felt not just plausible in this fictional tale but inevitable. After the hammer fell and the gavel's echo faded into the carpeted quiet of that private auction suite, the coin passed into a world the public rarely sees, a world of high-security vaults, private transport under armed guard, and owners who measure their possessions not in monetary value but in cultural and historical weight. The industrial heir who secured the coin that night did so not with the intent of displaying it to the world, but with the knowledge that it would become the crown jewel of his already formidable collection, a personal treasure known only to a handful of trusted associates. The transfer itself was a carefully choreographed affair. The coin never left its airtight, tamper-evident slab, but the slab was placed inside a titanium travel case, the kind designed to withstand extreme heat, crushing force, even prolonged submersion. That case was locked with a biometric seal keyed to the owner's fingerprint and retina scan, then placed inside a padded compartment within an armored courier vehicle escorted by unmarked SUVs. Its destination was a climate-controlled underground vault in a facility so secure that even its exact location is a closely guarded secret. The room where it now rests is lined with polished stainless steel drawers, each containing objects that the outside world might never know exist, rare patterns and prototypes from the early mint days, era coins that escaped official destruction, and experimental pieces from foreign governments. The 2060 cent sits in a dedicated compartment, bathed in inert gas to ensure that no environmental contaminants can tarnish its surfaces. Even the lighting in the room is engineered to eliminate any wavelengths that might cause long-term photochemical changes to the copper plating. For all practical purposes, the coin is frozen in time. News of the sale reverberated through the numismatic community like a seismic shock. Forums exploded with threads dissecting every scrap of information available, from grainy auction stills to the metallurgy report that had leaked in fragments to a couple of industry newsletters. Dealers who had never handled anything rarer than an MS-66 suddenly found themselves fielding questions from hopeful customers who brought in jars of pennies, convinced they might be sitting on another multi-million-dollar specimen. Coin roll hunters, those dedicated individuals who spend hours poring over bank rolls in search of hidden gems, redoubled their efforts, the dream of finding the next one, fueling a frenzy that swelled bank lobby lines and left coin-counting machines whirring late into the night. With excitement came rumor. Some whispered that the coin had been part of a batch of a dozen, struck intentionally for reasons unknown, and that 11 more remained unaccounted for. Others speculated that the rare earth element detected in its intermediate layer was part of a secret anti-counterfeiting program that had been abandoned but not entirely scrubbed from the mint's production lines. A few even claimed to have seen another example at a small-town coin show, though no credible photographs or verifications ever surfaced. The mystery only deepened when a former mint employee, speaking anonymously to a niche collector's magazine, hinted that stranger things have happened in Denver, and that the official record of 2000 SIXS production was not as clean as people think. Mainstream media coverage, predictably, focused on the dollar figure. Headlines framed the sale in incredulous terms. Pennies sells for $51 million. Here's why. How a 1-cent coin outpriced the Mona Lisa, from piggy bank to fortune. Television anchors held up common pennies on air, laughing at the absurdity before pivoting to human interest segments about kids searching through their change. But in the numismatic world, the tone was different. The coin had become a kind of holy relic, a proof that lightning can strike even in the most mass-produced corner of American currency. It was no longer just about the money, it was about the dream. The industrial heir who now owned it rarely spoke of it publicly, but within collecting circles, whispers about his private gallery began to circulate. It was said to be a minimalist space, each piece displayed individually under perfect lighting, surrounded by thick glass, with nothing else to distract the eye. The 2060 cent, though physically the smallest item in the room, was said to draw the longest gazes. Visitors, few and carefully chosen, described an almost surreal moment when they first saw it, the way the copper surface seemed to glow with a warmth unlike any other coin, the flawless edges, the doubling in the mint mark that seemed to wink under magnification. Inevitably, myths began to form around it. One particularly persistent tale claimed that the coin was insured for its full $51 million valuation, making it the highest insured individual piece of modern U.S. currency in existence. Another insisted that the vault housing it was periodically moved to new locations to throw off potential thieves. More imaginative storytellers spun yarns about the coin being cursed, its ownership bringing misfortune in exchange for its beauty, an echo of ancient legends about treasure too precious to be possessed without consequence. For the wider collecting community, though, its legacy was one of inspiration. Coin clubs saw a surge in membership, young hobbyists entered the field with fresh enthusiasm, and the idea that modern coins, often dismissed as too common to matter, could hold unimaginable value reshaped the way people approached their collections. Dealers began paying closer attention to the smallest anomalies in Lincoln cents from the 2000s, hoping to spot the telltale signs of another freak strike. In this way, the 2060 cent didn't just shatter a record, it shifted the culture of an entire hobby, reminding everyone that sometimes the extraordinary hides in plain sight. Years slipped by, but the legend of the $51 million penny refused to fade. Instead, it began to take on the quality of folklore, retold at coin shows in hushed tones, referenced in articles with a mix of awe and skepticism, and whispered among collectors who swore they knew someone who had once seen it in person. What made it remarkable wasn't just the staggering price or its flawless condition. It was the idea that something so small, so ordinary in its original purpose, could transcend the limits of its own existence. It became more than a coin. It became a story people wanted to believe in. Collectors around the globe, not just in the United States, became fascinated by it. In Tokyo, a coin club devoted an entire symposium to the study of unique anomalies in modern mintage. with the 2060 cent as its keynote example. In London, a panel at a numismatic conference debated whether the discovery of such an outlier in modern currency production represented a failure of quality control or a hidden masterpiece of precision. In Germany, a graduate student in economics used it as the centerpiece of his thesis on scarcity, perception, and market psychology, arguing that its value was less about intrinsic rarity and more about the mythos that had been built around it. Meanwhile, in the United States, a generation of collectors who had been teenagers during the coin's rise to fame were now adults with disposable income. And many had been shaped by the dream of finding the twin. This belief, that somewhere, another flawless, anomalous 2060 cent might be hiding in a coffee can, a safe deposit box, or a forgotten roll of pennies, became a driving force in the hobby. Search groups formed online, dedicated entirely to examining thousands of cents from the mid-2000s, sharing high-resolution photos, cataloging any oddities in strike or composition. Each time a doubled mint mark or unusual coloration appeared, hope surged. Each time, the excitement was tempered by reality, as none matched the exact combination of perfection and metallurgical anomaly that defined the original. This pursuit took on an almost pilgrim-like quality. Some collectors would travel to cities where large quantities of 2060 cents had first entered circulation, hoping to find bank vaults or coin dealers with untouched rolls from that year. Others struck deals with cash handling companies to examine returned coinage before it was rebagged for redistribution. The odds were astronomical, but the coin's existence had already proven that impossibility was not the same as non-existence. Academics, too, began to take interest beyond numismatics. Sociologists examined the way the coin's story spread, noting how it mirrored the viral growth of urban legends. Economists dissected the sale as a case study in extreme market value for a non-utilitarian asset, exploring parallels with rare art, luxury watches, and one-of-a-kind sports memorabilia. Psychologists delved into the phenomenon of attainable fantasy, the idea that unlike a famous painting or historic artifact locked away for centuries, a penny could, in theory, pass through anyone's hands. It was the ultimate democratization of treasure hunting, a symbol that riches could be hidden in plain sight. The coin's owner remained largely silent, declining interviews and refusing offers from museums and exhibitions. A few times, rumors emerged that the coin had been loaned out for private viewings to heads of state or billionaire collectors, always under tight security, always with a no photography rule. Whether these events actually happened was impossible to confirm, but their very possibility kept the story alive. And in the absence of facts, myths grew stronger. Some believed the coin had been moved overseas for safekeeping. Others whispered that it had been placed in a private time capsule, not to be opened for 100 years. By the coin's 20th anniversary in 2026, its legend had reached such proportions that mainstream publications revisited the story, running retrospectives filled with speculative "Where is it now?" sidebars and grainy archive photos from the original auction. Numismatic YouTubers, some of whom had built entire careers on the back of rare coin content, released multi-hour documentaries dissecting every known detail, even attempting to digitally reconstruct the coin in 3D from existing images. These videos drew millions of views, proving that even 2 decades later, the fascination had not waned. What emerged over time was the recognition that the coin's impact had been cultural as much as financial. It had drawn thousands into a hobby that thrives on detail, patience, and a love for history. It had bridged the gap between the casual change checker and the elite collector. And perhaps most importantly, it had shown that in a world of mass production and digital replication, physical rarity still had the power to ignite imaginations and move mountains of money. It was late autumn when the first whisper began to circulate, carried quietly through numismatic chat rooms and private collector circles. The source was vague, the details incomplete, but the suggestion was enough to ignite a frenzy. A coin dealer in a small southwestern town claimed to have come across a 2060 Lincoln cent that looked a little too familiar. He said nothing about a doubled mint mark, nothing about rare earth metals or flawless surfaces, just that the color, the strike, and the overall look of the coin made him think of the $51 million legend. At first, most brushed it off. Dealers receive odd-looking coins every day, and the myth of the twin had been circulating for so long that it was almost a ritual to dismiss such claims. But this time was different. The dealer wasn't a rookie trying to draw attention to his shop. He was a seasoned professional with a reputation for understatement, the kind of man who had handled million-dollar coins without theatrics. He had no need for publicity. When a friend in the business pressed him, he admitted that the coin had come in mixed change from a local estate's sale and that he'd put it aside because, under magnification, it showed an obverse strike so deep and sharp it could rival the finest proof coins. He had yet to test it, weigh it, or send it for grading, but even without these steps, he described an odd sheen to the surface, something he couldn't place but that felt unlike ordinary copper-plated zinc. It wasn't long before the story reached the ears of a prominent YouTube coin reviewer, a man known for sensational but surprisingly well-researched content. Within days, a video appeared titled, "Could this be the $51 million Pennies lost twin?" It showed nothing more than the dealer's hand holding a slabbed coin in indirect light, the camera carefully avoiding any identifying details. The voiceover was careful to hedge every claim, yet the mere suggestion sent the internet into overdrive. Comments poured in, dissecting every pixel of the footage, adjusting brightness and contrast, claiming to spot double digits in the date or unusual coloration in the fields. Soon, the coin was sent to a grading service, not for public submission but through a discreet private channel reserved for high-value items. The graders, bound by confidentiality agreements, performed the standard battery of tests: weight measurement to within 1/100th of a gram, microscopic dye state analysis, and preliminary XRF scans of the surface. What they found was enough to cause internal murmurs. The coin was indeed 2.5 grams, perfectly within tolerance. The surfaces were a blazing red with no visible marks even at 20x magnification, and the strike quality was identical to that of the original record holder. Even more unsettling, the surface skin revealed traces of the same intermediate metallic layer, a near-perfect match to the mysterious composition that had baffled researchers years earlier. The grading service faced an unprecedented dilemma. If this truly was a second specimen, it would shake the market and the legend alike. The $51 million sale had been underpinned by the fact that the coin was unique, utterly one of a kind. The emergence of another would inevitably lower the perceived rarity, perhaps drastically altering its value. But the graders also knew that announcing such a find could set off a feeding frenzy among collectors and opportunists alike, not to mention the legal and ethical questions it might raise about how such coins entered circulation in the first place. For weeks, nothing was said publicly. Those who knew remained tight-lipped, aware that one careless word could ignite a storm. Yet, in the age of instant communication, silence is as good as fuel for speculation. Forum posts appeared with titles like, "Is the twin penny finally here?" and "Denver Mint cover-up?" Theories multiplied. Some claimed the mint had quietly struck a handful of these special planchets for internal testing. Others suggested they were gifts for VIPs that had slipped into circulation by accident. The most conspiratorial voices insisted that the coins had been intentionally released in minuscule quantities as a sort of secret challenge to collectors, a treasure hunt sanctioned from within the mint itself. When the news finally broke, it wasn't through an official announcement or a press release but through a leaked photograph. The image, grainy and slightly out of focus, showed a coin in a grading holder, the label partially obscured. Still, enough of the obverse was visible to set off alarms: the doubled D mint mark, the perfect fields, the unbroken red luster. Within hours, the image was shared across every major coin collecting platform, dissected in detail, and archived in countless online repositories. Collectors who had long since given up the hunt for a second example suddenly felt the old thrill return. Dealers began to see a spike in requests for unopened rolls of 2,060 cents, and bank tellers reported a noticeable uptick in customers asking for large quantities of pennies. Even pawn shops, which rarely dealt in single cents, started fielding phone calls from people convinced they had stumbled onto a fortune. The industrial heir who owned the original coin was reportedly furious when he heard of the discovery. Whether out of genuine concern for the coin's devaluation or out of wounded pride, he quietly reached out to intermediaries in an attempt to purchase the second coin before it hit the open market. Rumor had it that an offer in the 8-figure range was made almost immediately, but the dealer, sensing the gravity of his find, declined. He wanted the coin's provenance documented and its existence made public, regardless of what it might mean for the market price. It was clear now that the saga of the $51 million penny wasn't over. If anything, it was entering a new chapter, one that might prove even more explosive than the first. Once the existence of the second coin was no longer just rumor, the story spiraled into a frenzy so intense that even non-collectors couldn't escape it. National news channels ran primetime segments about the twin penny, and talk shows invited numismatic experts to debate whether the value of the original $51 million sale was now a fantasy or whether this second example could ignite a bidding war strong enough to match, or even surpass, that figure. Newspapers that had once buried coin-related news in obscure collector columns now splashed photos of the 2006 descent on their front pages. Within a week, major auction houses were courting the dealer. He received calls from names he had only ever read about, titans of the art, jewelry, and rare collectibles world, offering everything from private jet transportation to exclusive luxury packages in exchange for the right to list the coin. The offers were as extravagant as they were persistent. One European billionaire reportedly offered to trade a historic yacht for the penny, claiming it would be the crown jewel of a collection worth more than most countries' GDP. Another potential buyer proposed a payment not in cash, but in a rare diamond he insisted had been worn by royalty. But the attention also brought trouble. Within days of the leak, lawyers representing the U.S. Mint sent formal inquiries to the dealer, citing questions about how such a coin could have entered circulation. The possibility that it had left the mint through unofficial channels, whether by accident or deliberate action, raised legal questions that could not be ignored. Behind closed doors, there were whispers that the government might attempt to seize the coin outright, arguing it was federal property that had never been authorized for release. Collectors erupted in outrage at the thought. Forums buzzed with calls to let history stand, and to keep the coin in private hands. Others argued that if the mint had indeed made a mistake, the law was the law, no matter how rare the find. Protests, though small, even formed outside the Denver Mint, with signs reading, "Coins for the people," and "Don't erase our history." The saga had moved far beyond numismatics. It was now a cultural flashpoint. The dealer, perhaps realizing the storm he was in, decided to make his move quickly. He contracted with one of the most respected auction houses in the world and set a date just 60 days away for the public sale of the coin. The announcement was made in a press conference streamed online, drawing hundreds of thousands of viewers worldwide. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, and security guards flanked the display case holding the coin, which sat under glaring spotlights in a bulletproof, climate-controlled enclosure. As the auction date approached, speculation reached absurd heights. Analysts on financial news programs discussed the coin's potential as an alternative asset class. Influencers posted videos claiming to have psychic visions of the final hammer price. High-profile investors began making public statements about their intention to bid, including a tech billionaire who had been an outspoken critic of cryptocurrency, declaring, "If I'm going to hold something of value, I want it to be tangible. And there's nothing more tangible than a penny worth more than gold, more than diamonds, more than oil." The night of the auction arrived with the atmosphere of a championship boxing match. Rows of suited attendees filled the hall, while hundreds more joined via live stream, some bidding by phone from undisclosed locations. The opening bid came in at $10 million, a deliberate shock meant to thin out casual contenders. Within minutes, it jumped to $25 million, then $35 million. The bidding war was fierce, punctuated by gasps and murmurs from the audience each time a new record was set. By the time the price hit $50 million, only two bidders remained, the industrial heir who owned the original and an anonymous participant dialing in through a private satellite connection. The heir fought hard, his bids coming fast, but the mysterious rival was relentless. When the hammer finally fell, The winning bid stood at a staggering $62.3 million, shattering the previous record and making the twin penny the most expensive modern coin ever sold. As cheers erupted in the room, speculation about the identity of the anonymous bidder consumed the press. Some believed it was a Middle Eastern royal family. Others swore it was a tech magnate seeking to outshine his rivals. Whoever it was, they had secured a piece of numismatic history and cemented the legend of the 2006 Lincoln cent not as a one-off miracle, but as a category unto itself, a coin so rare and mysterious that it could command the kind of money usually reserved for priceless art or historic relics. Yet the sale didn't end the story, it amplified it. If there were two coins, could there be a third? The world's coin hunters redoubled their efforts, and the U.S. Mint quietly announced an internal review of production records from 2006. That review, they claimed, was simply to ensure the integrity of minting operations. But those who had followed the saga from the beginning knew better. Something about those coins defied explanation, and the world wasn't done chasing the truth. The morning after the Twin Pennies record-shattering auction, the world's financial and collectible markets seemed to hum with a different kind of electricity. The headlines were relentless. Second 2060 penny sells for $62 million. Modern coin breaks all records. Numismatic world turned upside down. Social media exploded with reaction videos. Coin collectors crying in disbelief, influencers hamming up their faux penny finds, and even schoolchildren proudly showing off the pocket change they swore looked special. The fever wasn't just confined to America, it went global. In Tokyo, a numismatic museum announced a Lincoln cent exhibition, displaying dozens of high-grade examples from 2006 alongside magnifying glasses for visitors to inspect them closely. In London, luxury auctioneers began fielding calls from clients asking whether they should diversify into pennies. In Johannesburg, a private gold dealer began offering a trade program: bring in your 2060 cents, and he'd weigh them, skin them, and give you a small gold coin if it looked promising. Banks across the United States started noticing an unusual pattern: withdrawals of massive amounts of rolled cents, particularly from regions where large quantities of Denver-minted coins had originally been distributed. Tellers reported long lines of hopeful searchers arriving with carts, buckets, and duffel bags. Some customers went so far as to bring portable scales and loops right into the bank lobby. But with the mania came new dangers. Fake coins began flooding the market. Some were crude copies made with laser engraving and cheap copper, but others were disturbingly sophisticated, altered from genuine cents using high-end machining to mimic the distinctive doubled mint mark and unusual surface finish. These counterfeits found their way into online marketplaces, often selling for thousands to desperate buyers before being exposed. Even experienced dealers were fooled more than once, leading grading companies to issue public statements about increased verification measures. Meanwhile, deep inside the U.S. Mint's Denver facility, a small team of specialists pored over production logs, archived die sets, and metallurgical reports from 2006. Something wasn't adding up. The standard records showed nothing unusual. Same zinc core, same copper plating, same production process, but subtle inconsistencies began to emerge. The team noticed a short, unexplained production halt in mid-March of that year, lasting only 6 hours, followed by a rapid resumption of output. No reason was documented, yet during that period, a handful of test strike coins were recorded as being produced and later destroyed. No serial numbers were listed for these test strikes, and no photographic evidence remained. One retired Mint employee, tracked down by an investigative journalist, hinted at something strange. "We had a visit that week," he said cautiously. "Not from Washington, higher up. Foreign suits. We were told to keep our mouths shut, and then a few days later, I saw coins on the inspection table that didn't look like anything we'd made before. I asked about them once. Got told never to ask again." This revelation triggered a wave of conspiracy theories. Some claimed the 2060 super cents were part of a secret intergovernmental gift exchange, never meant to see the public. Others suggested they were test subjects for an experimental anti-counterfeiting alloy that had been abandoned. The most outlandish theory posited that the coins were time capsule artifacts, struck with a hidden code in their metallurgical makeup to be discovered decades later. The buyer of the second coin remained anonymous, but in an unusual twist, they allowed it to go on a world tour, under armed guard, to be displayed in major capitals. The coin traveled in a custom titanium case, accompanied by a temperature and humidity control system that adjusted itself automatically depending on location. Crowds waited in lines that stretched for blocks just to spend 30 seconds staring at it through bulletproof glass. In Paris, someone even proposed marriage in front of the display, claiming the coin represented the value of rare and beautiful things. For the original $51 million owner, the arrival of a second specimen had been a blow, but privately, sources said he was already preparing for something bigger. Rumors swirled that a third coin had surfaced, not in the United States, but in a remote village in South America, where a local schoolteacher supposedly found it in a jar of coins used for math lessons. This one, if real, bore a subtle difference in the reverse die, slightly altered wheat lines in the Lincoln Memorial steps that no other coin of the year seemed to share. As whispers of the possible third coin spread, the global hunt entered a new phase, one no longer confined to the borders of the U.S. People began searching coins in grocery stores in Mexico, flea markets in Germany, and antique shops in Canada. The penny fever had become more than a collector's craze, it was now a cultural obsession, a shared global treasure hunt fueled by mystery, greed, and the irresistible idea that something so small could be worth more than a skyscraper. Somewhere, hidden in plain sight, another piece of the puzzle might be waiting. And if history had taught anything, it was that once the world knew a treasure existed, someone would eventually find it. The rumors of the third coin transformed the already feverish hunt into something bordering on madness. Collectors, treasure hunters, private detectives, and even underworld operatives fanned out across continents, all chasing whispers and half-truths about a Lincoln cent that had never been meant to exist. Flights were booked overnight, suitcases were packed with portable coin scales and magnifiers, and quiet little towns suddenly found themselves hosting visitors with nervous eyes and thick wallets. The story of the South American teacher became the focal point. According to locals, she had been using an old glass jar of coins for decades as a teaching tool for basic math problems. She'd inherited the jar from her father, who had been a longshoreman at a coastal port. Somewhere along the way, a U.S. penny had slipped into the mix. When she saw the frenzy online about the 2060 coins, she thought nothing of it, until she noticed that her penny had the same deep copper sheen and sharp doubling on the min mark. Out of curiosity, she took it to a local pawn shop. Within hours, word had leaked, and the village was overrun with strangers asking to see the coin. The teacher, fearing theft, entrusted the penny to a cousin in the city. But that's when the shadows moved in. Surveillance footage later captured two unknown men attempting to break into the cousin's apartment. The cousin had already fled, carrying the coin in a plain envelope tucked inside an old Bible. For the next week, the coin moved in secret, on buses, in hidden compartments of taxis, even smuggled inside a loaf of bread to avoid detection. Meanwhile, the black market had taken notice. A shadowy syndicate, known to deal in stolen art and rare artifacts, was allegedly offering $70 million in untraceable cryptocurrency for the coin, no questions asked. That offer tempted more than one player in the hunt, but it also drew the attention of international law enforcement agencies. Interpol quietly dispatched operatives to monitor ports, airports, and border crossings where the coin might surface. The teacher's cousin finally reached the capital, where a wealthy private collector, already infamous for owning the first known brasher doubloon, offered her lifetime financial security in exchange for the penny. She refused. "It's not just about the money," she said in a rare interview. "It's about what it means. This coin shouldn't even exist, and yet here it is. That tells me something bigger is going on." Her instincts were right. A breakthrough came when a retired metallurgist from the Denver Mint contacted her through a trusted intermediary. He revealed that in March 2006, the Mint had been contracted, off the books, to test a proprietary copper alloy embedded with microscopic nanostructures designed to act as anti-counterfeiting markers. These markers, invisible to the naked eye, could be read by specialized scanners, effectively making each coin a unique, trackable object. The project was abruptly shut down for reasons he claimed were classified. The test coins were supposed to be destroyed. Somehow, 3 had escaped. The revelation reframed everything. If each coin carried a unique microscopic signature, then whoever owned them could, in theory, be tracked anywhere in the world. The coins were not just rare collectibles, they were potential tools for surveillance or secure transactions beyond anything the public had imagined. When the public sale of the third coin was announced, this time in a neutral location under international security, the atmosphere was electric. The auction drew an audience of heads of state, tech magnates, private security firms, and shadowy buyers cloaked in anonymity. Bidding opened at $40 million and rocketed past $80 million in minutes. The tension in the room was so thick that even the auctioneer's voice cracked. And then, a shocking twist. Before the final bid could be called, agents in dark suits entered the hall. The auction was halted. The lead agent stepped to the podium and, in a voice carrying equal measures of authority and finality, declared the coin to be classified federal property of the United States government. In a swift, almost surgical operation, the coin was secured in a reinforced case and removed under heavy guard. The crowd erupted in outrage, lawsuits were threatened on the spot, and chaos filled the hall. In the days that followed, official statements were scarce. The U.S. Mint issued a terse press release stating that 3 test specimens from 2006 have been recovered and are being retained for national security purposes. Whether the coins truly all ended up in government hands or whether one, or more, remained hidden was left unanswered. As for the first 2 coins, their owners went silent. Rumors swirled that they had been approached with offers they couldn't refuse, and that both pennies were now locked away in undisclosed government vaults. No one could prove it, but in the numismatic world, the legend only grew. And so, the saga of the 2060 Lincoln cents closed, not with a final sale, but with a mystery sealed behind steel doors. Somewhere, perhaps, another exists, tucked into a forgotten change jar, sitting quietly in a drawer, or riding unnoticed in the pocket of a pair of old jeans. The world may never know. But for those who believe, the hunt never truly ends, because sometimes, the smallest things carry the biggest secrets.